Today, we have a special guest who is going to speak to us on a topic about the National Institute of Health grants and how to navigate those grants. I'd like to say one, two things about our speaker so that we understand our speaker for today. So our speaker for today is Professor Echezona Ezanolwe. He's also known as Dr. Easy, and he's a board-certified pediatrician of the American Board of Pediatrics and a professor of pediatric infectious diseases and epidemiology of the University of Nigeria. He is an expert in implementation science with research focused on the use of implementation science to enhance the effectiveness and quality of health services to improve health outcomes. He's also the director of the Nigeria Implementation Science Alliance, NISA, which was started as a collaboration among United States purpose-supported implementing partners, research universities, and policymakers in Nigeria to enhance the quality of healthcare through implementation science and research. He also happens to be the director of the Center for Translation and Implementation Research, which is the center bringing this webinar live to you today. He has more than 95 peer-reviewed publications and has served as a PI on more than 25 peer-reviewed research projects, including multiple NIH-funded projects. And it is my pleasure to welcome Professor Echezona Ezanolwe to the webinar today, and I invite him to speak to us. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tanya, and thank you, everyone, and Happy New Year. I can't turn on my video, so I tried. It says still disabled, but I am going to go ahead and speak. This is going to be one of many series that we're going to be bringing across every month for the rest of the year. We will invite speakers out of Nigeria and within Nigeria to speak on different topics. We use the NIH grant as our model grant for training. That does not mean that that's the only type of grant that we discuss, nor does that mean that that is the only type of grant that we apply for. But our belief is that when people understand how the NIH grant works, it is most likely that they can put together any other type of grant. It is one of the most rigorous in the world. It is one of the most competitive in the world. It's also one of the most prestigious in the world. So that's why we pick on NIH grant as our model for training. So there are some changes that are happening in NIH, but until those changes happen, we focus on trying to get to you to understand what we call the score driving criteria. So the NIH is very clear on how the grants are being reviewed, and the grants are reviewed on 5 main criteria. Those 5 criteria is: one is significance. You are being able to demonstrate how your grant is significant to the world. The second thing is in terms of innovation, how innovative or what are the innovative aspects of your proposal. The third thing is your investigative team. So the grant looks at both the principal investigators, but also look at the people who are in your team. So the team is the opportunity for you to bring in a group of people that you think have the expertise to respond to the proposal that you're putting together. The fourth thing is approach. That is a major part of the grant, because usually when they say when grants die, they die because of approach. So this is things that we discuss very well. And then the last thing is environment. So what you hear us go is to go through all those 5 aspects that drive the score over this next 12 months. So the other thing that you also understand is the 5 way we try to write our grants. So we always start our grant on what is the problem you are trying to solve. Once you're able to clearly define that program, that aligns you to your significance. You talk about what is known about that problem. That is how you put together all those premises for you to say what you're trying to do. Then you are also going to think about what is the remaining gap, because the whole idea about proposal, when you're asking people money, is to say, this is what I can contribute. This is a new thing. This is a gap. What is remaining unknown? This is different from program grants where you are implementing what is already known. So in this case, you are bringing in a new idea into the literature in terms of what has not been known. So that's where you have to clearly identify those gaps. And when you identify those gaps, then you're going to discuss about what are you proposing to do. And once you define what you're going to propose to do, then the 15 is how are you going to do it? So these 5 steps in writing grant is something that you're going to be hearing every month across the next 12 months. But today, for the first thing, what I wanted to do is that we also noticed that a lot of people have never really known how to match their own NIH grant to their skill, to their expertise. So what I'm going to do today is a little practical. If you have your laptop, you should open them up because I think you can work with me and it will be easier for you so that you can understand what we're trying to do. I see hands raised, but during this period, if you can type in your question on the chat and that can be brought up to me, I will address them.
Yes, let them type on the Q&A for now.
For Q&A, thank you so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. First of all, I'm going to assume things that nobody here knows how to do this. So forgive me if this is very rudimentary to you, but what it does is for the people who are joining us for the first time, I want to also carry them along. So what I'm going to do here is to share my screen. So when I share my screen, you are going to be able to see the part of the grant that we are.
Yeah, I think, yes. I think Prof's network has some little challenges. So let's wait a while for him to get back on the webinar. And please, in the meantime, can we put our questions, our comments on the Q&A? The chat is not functional in this webinar. Thank you. So hi, everybody. Our speaker dropped off, but he's back shortly. So let's give him a little more time to get back on the webinar.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, loud and clear.
Okay, I am not sure what is going on, but I signed on my phone
for a little while for my computer to reboot so I can go back to the website. It just turned off the moment I signed onto the website. So I'm just gonna speak until my computer reboots, and then I'm back there. So what I'm going to do, let me describe what I'm going to do. Maybe that will be helpful once I'm able to sign back into the computer. But what I'm going to do is to take you to the Grants.Gov, and I'm going to tell you.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, Prof. We can't hear you. Okay, he's out. The network's taking him out again. So, ladies and gentlemen, can we just exercise a little bit of more patience while he gets back on the webinar? Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Prof, welcome back.
I am sorry. I'm really terribly sorry. So the biosketch connects you and clearly defines what is it that you have an expertise in. And what you're going to be doing when you go to the grant.gov is to find grants that speaks to you. When I say grant that speak to you, is grants that fit into your training, your education, and grants that fit into your expertise. How do you demonstrate expertise? That's what that biosketch is going to show. It's going to show your publications. It's going to show what you have been able to contribute from your team. And that's how you pick the grant that matches your expertise. So once you get to this grant, I'm going to show you different types of grant that depend on the criteria, on the level where you are. I will start from people who have finished their terminal degree. These are people who have finished their residency training. So you are a medical doctor, you are a pharmacist, you are a veterinary doctor, you finish. And again, for NIH purposes, the MBBS is a terminal degree. So don't let anybody tell you any different. You do not need to have PhD if you have an MBBS to apply for NIH grant. All you need is to have MBBS. And when you have
Okay, Prof, it looks like we lost you again. So we'll wait for you to get back. But everyone know the chat is now enabled, so you can put your comments or your questions there. Thank you. Okay, guys, just to let you know, we're still here and we're waiting for Prof to rejoin the webinar. So please wait a bit. Thank you. Okay, everyone, Prof is just about to join and take us through the lesson of going through the NIH grant portal.
Thank you, everyone. I just had people making fun of me to say if I was in Enugu, I would say that the people in my village is after me. But I'm in the US currently, so I don't think they can get to me here unless their skill has improved, and they can get to me wherever I am. But I'm so sorry what is going on. I still don't have the video, so once that is on, I will turn back to the video. But I want to take us back to where we started, which is going back to the Grant.Gov. So if you have your computer, again, I want you to join me and follow the sequence so that you can see what I'm doing. And if you have any question, please put it in the chat, that will come to me. So here is us again going to Grant.Gov. So it's www.grant.gov. This is what you will see. And I'm going to ask questions. Tonya, you tell me once you can see the screen and that you can see the Grant.Gov.
Yeah, we can see the screen, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to do this in different ways to help people to understand what I'm doing. So I was explaining when you are regarded as early investigator, early stage investigator by NIH, which is when your terminal degrees is less than 10 years. If you apply grant with me and we both score very good, but you scored 10 points below me, you are more likely to get the grant than I will get it. That's because NIH will look at you and say you are early stage investigator, you are an early investigator within 10 years of your graduation, and you should be supported much more than me that have had this grant many different times. So that is one advantage of early stage investigator. I was also talking about how people who have MBBS become early stage investigators. So you see some people that have finished medical school for 30 years, who have finished medical school for 30 years, and they decided that they were going to get their PhD. As you can see, I do not have a PhD. So one day you might see me go get a PhD. What would that do for me? It will make me an early stage investigator again, because I can now start grants all over again with my PhD. Usually what happens is that when people go to get a PhD, they get a PhD in a different field. So when you get it as a doctor, it's really doesn't give you that much an advantage. But when you actually get it in PhD in something like in data science, PhD in different things, it does give you another area of expertise, and you can begin to build that area as a new investigator. So why am I saying that? Because there is a grant specifically for NIH. Training grants for those people are considered K grant. So if you go into the word and put something like, I will put in a K and see whether that does it. But because I know the number, I can put in a K43. A K43 is an equivalent grant that is meant for people who are not in the United States, people who are not permanent residents. We have a lot of Nigerians in Nigeria who are permanent residents of the US. They do not qualify for this grant. If you are also a citizen of the US, even if you live in Nigeria, you do not qualify for this grant. So you have to be a non-citizen of the United States. And if you are a citizen of the United States, there are K grants that are open for you. And if that is your case, please send me a question, and I can focus on that later on today. But I am going to focus on this grant called K43. So if you put in a K43 and you do a search, you are going to see of all of those things. So to understand this, I'm going to go back again and show you all the grants. So if I go back to all the grants, what you see here is, you see here there are 2,573 grant funding opportunity that is here. When I go from there and limit it, I've just put in K43, very specific, the grant I'm looking for, and do search, it goes from 2,000 and it comes to 2 grants. So that takes you away from all the things that you're going to waste your time to do. You just come down here, you see this grant was posted September of last year. It is going to be on once every year for the next 2 years for this year 2023, and then usually they will renew it. So 2021, 2022, 2023. So this is the last year for this cycle, and then most times they will renew it for another 3 years, so that there may be changes. Before, this grant used to be 2 types. So it used to be 1 type, but now it's 2 types. So you can see the first one here said independent clinical trial required, which means if you're applying with this RFA, this funding opportunity, you have to propose a clinical trials that you're going to do under a grant. So what usually happens is that the biggest thing in this grant is 2 things: that the candidate is well trained, the candidate is well qualified. They don't have to have 500 publications. The candidate, what I consider a good candidate, I sat on the review for this for 10 years. One of the things I consider very good here is a candidate who has a terminal degree, who have shown a publications. I usually look at 5 to 10. I see maybe they have 1, 2 that are first author. And that just to demonstrate to me that the ones that they have is not just joining other people, that 2 first authors is enough to show me that they can write. So if I have a candidate who has 10 papers with 2 of them as first author, who has a PhD or an MBBS, that's a candidate that I say very good trained. The most other thing that is dependent on is who is your mentor. What I usually like is to see when you have a Nigerian mentor who is very good person that is well recognized, and then you have an American co-mentor. That demonstrates somebody who is well prepared and who have assembled a team to mentor them very well. So that is the 2 grant that you do. So the difference between these 2 is that the second one here, the PAR 21252, does not require an independent clinical trial for the person who is in training. So what they will allow you to define is to identify areas of the grant that you want to learn expertise. So for example, let's say you are a pediatrician and you finish your training, and then you want to do that, and you said, okay, I want to look at focused in our look at sickle cell, and my focus is to reduce mortality among individuals with sickle cell disease. And one of the things you decide to do is to say, despite all the big things that is happening in sickle cell, that there are few things that we have not done very well. One of them is to educate our patient about things like dehydration. One of them is to educate our patient about the prophylaxis with penicillin. One of them is to educate our patient with getting up to date with immunization. And you propose to do an implementation research where you are going to integrate all of these things into a primary care setting. And you say, I am trained, I am a doctor, I finished in the last 10 years, I have finished my residency in pediatric hematology, I am now want to go move my career in this pathway. And as part of my team, my mentoring team, I'm picking on Professor Zanolo, who is an implementation scientist, as one of my mentor, but I'm also picking on Professor Nado from University of Abuja, who is a well-known hematologist. So suddenly your application looks different because you're looking at 2 mentors who have had multiple NIH grants, to be your mentor. One is your mentor in the content area, which is in hematology. Another one is an area of research implementation science that you want to go into. So you now put together this proposal and try to find 5 core areas where you want to learn. One will be how to recruit participants. The second one will be how to do stakeholder engagement. The other one will be how to retain people that you recruit into clinical trials. And the other one will be the principles of implementation science and that. So you can now define those areas. So that is what the 21-252 is. In 21-251, in addition to defining these 5 areas, you stipulate a clinical trial that you want to do. In this 252, you can define those 5 areas, but don't do a clinical trial. If there is an ongoing clinical trial by either myself or Dr. Nodo that you want to use to build your expertise. So that's one of the things that is there. So now we talked about this K43. Let me pause a little bit and see, Tonia, is there any question on K43 on that?
No, sir, there are no specific questions on K43, but there are questions which you probably answer later.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on to the next one, and that's what we're going to do, each of those topics, to see if you do have a question. I will be happy to address them as we go on. So let's move from a K grant, and I will talk a little bit about the R grants. So the R grants are different kind of grants that are also very important for those who are starting their career early. So one of those is when you come into an R03. An R03 is a small grant, and is a grant that is there for 2 years. The maximum amount of money is $50,000 a year for 2 years. And this grant, you do not have to have a hypothesis. You just can be used as a hypothesis generating grant. So this might be where you're trying to develop something, you're trying to complete a grant to get your pilot data. You're also using it to also generate a hypothesis. So this is a very important grant for people who are starting their career early. I have had an R03. I have most of these grants. The only grant that I have not had that are painful to me is the K grant, which I consider the best NIH grant. I did not mention something about the K grant that is important, is that the K grant allows NIH to support your salary and protect you from doing clinical work for 5 years, supporting up to 75% of your salary. You will never have it as good as you have a K grant. So for people like me who missed the K grant and went to an R, and once you have an R as PI, you cannot have a K grant. So I always tell people to focus on the K. And then when you have not gotten a K and the K is still what you want to do, do not be the PI on an R grant. On an R grant, you will need about a minimum of almost 4 R grants to get the same protection that you have on just a single K. So when I'm an investigator, I get 10% of my salary covered on the grant. Maybe if it's a big grant, I'll get 15%. But I've been on grant as a PI for 2%. I currently have one that I have 2% on. So those are not grants that support your career growth. They are more of grants when you have, stabilized in your career. So the K remains the best grant, in my opinion, for early stage investigator. So we talked about the R03. So let me put in here R03. So that's all I put in here, and I do a search. You can see those 2,000 came down to 36. So what I'm going to do here to take you opportunity is to take one of the R. And then what I'm going to do with the R is to show you when you open this grant, what should be an important thing to you. So if you look at this grant, right off the bat, it says limited competition. So be careful when you see that. When you see that, it says small grant program for NHBLI K01. So this K is the same thing like those K we discussed about, but if you look at this does not include K43. This is the equivalent of K43 for American citizen and permanent resident. So these grants that are here are only left for American permanent residents, mostly people in American institutions. There is one here that is very interesting, which is a K01. because it's a grant that you can be a U.S. institution, but you can apply to spend the time in LMIC. So someone at Harvard can apply for a KO1 and spend 3 months every year for the next 5 years at the University of Nigeria or the University of Ibadan or the Aminu Kano University or Bayero University. So this is a very good grant for Nigerians who are Americans who are in American institution to be able to do work in Nigeria. But the rest of the grants are usually for American citizens and American permanent residents. So this grant, once you see it, if you're in Nigeria and you qualify for the K43, you do not qualify for this grant. So you still see that limited competition. So that's one of the things I will not go into. But I'm going to look at one that does not say that. And then I will show you what you look for when you find this kind of grant. So I'm pulling down. I see this one that talk about ethical, legal, and social implications, small grants. I said, okay, that did not have those limited competition. Again, you see limited competition, all of those things. So I'm going to put on that one and see. So when you open the grant, this is what you see. Tanya, can you see this?
Yes, sir. I can see document type.
So a few things that you want to look at, you see when it was posted in 2022, you see when it's closing. It's closing in July 19, 2023. So the first question you ask yourself is, do I have the time to put this grant together in 6 months? For me, that have written grants many times, for me to write a grant in an area that I have not written before, it takes me 6 months. If it's an area that I have written before, I have been able to drive it down to 3 months. And then with the team that we have at CITIA, we have actually driven it down to 6 weeks and be able to submit a grant, which is really something I have never been able to do when I was in the US, was to submit a grant in 6 weeks. But the exceptional team that we have at the city at the University of Nigeria now, we're able to submit grants in 6 weeks, and we have done that multiple times. But if you have never written a grants together before, I would say plan for a year. So if you take something like the K grant this year, plan to submit it next year, or this year if you start now, because it's November. So that gives you 11 months. But 6 months is pushing it for somebody who has not done a grant before. But if you have done a grant before, then you can do this in 6 months. So that's the first thing you look at. Then before you waste your time further, I would say open the grant. So this is it. You go here, say link to additional information. You click on this, and it will open the complete grant for you. So, Tonya, can you see that?
Yes, sir. We can see that.
Okay. If you open this grant, you see the different, there are 27 centers and institutes in the NIH, and you see the ones that are involved here. Whenever you see Fogarty, that tells you that it's most likely involving international, because it's the Fogarty International Center. That's the center that most NIH grant that LMIC countries like Nigeria participate in. So you see that, you mark it, you highlight it, that's a good sign. Then before you waste your time, I want you to go down, all the way down. I'm scrolling down to where they talk about eligibility. That's what you want to do the first time. So you go down to eligibility section 3. So you look at eligible organizations, and all you really want to do is go down and see whether foreign institutions are allowed. So when you look at this grant, you see that non-domestic, non-US foreign institutions are eligible to apply. This is the first thing you want to do for any grant. I can't tell you most times that people have gotten a grant, submitted it, it doesn't even move anywhere because they didn't realize that Nigeria foreign institutions were not allowed. It stops at the time you submit them. It doesn't move any further. So this is why this is important. Once you know that this is important, you can now see here for-profit, non-profits, government. You can see all the eligible higher institutions, so you see all of that. But for you, what matters the most is this. You only bother when you see this type of thing, foreign institutions are eligible to apply. So once you look at that, you said, okay, then you want to go back now and say, this is a grant I want to review. So if you look at that, you see some things like this. For example, you see this area of emphasis. include but not limited to. What I always say is that unless you have such an exceptional idea or you intend your grandfather to fund this grant, I want you to try in the first time you're writing this grant to try to limit yourself to this emphasis area. As you write more grants, you can go out of those emphasis area. But when you see this, don't try to say, oh, I remember the fund they used to make when I was in secondary school, and they said there was a guy in WAEC, and they asked him the question to write about Jesus Christ. And he said, who am I to write about Jesus Christ? Because he had only prepared for John the Baptist. So he said, instead of writing for Jesus Christ, I'm going to write about John the Baptist who prepared the way for him. So he went ahead and wrote about the John the Baptist. So in this particular case, do not do that. Do not come in and say, oh, this is what I want to do. Again, unless your grandfather hopes to fund it. But if you're submitting this to compete with others, paying attention to the detail, paying attention to the direction is important. And my advice to you is that if you're starting early, keep to this area of emphasis. This is good because they actually tell you the things they want you to do. So I'm not going to go into details on this, but I can show you things like studies on outreach and community engagement in neuropsychiatric genetics. Okay, research that is related to implication of investigating genetic risks for mental health in communities. You can go down and look at ethical and cultural issues surrounding informed consent, data sharing, privacy for data collection in a healthcare setting. So you can read through this and see the areas of emphasis that they have here and see whether this is an area that speaks to you. And that's how you begin to pick what you're going to see. When there is a match between their area of emphasis and your training and your expertise and the things you have done that you may have written papers on, that becomes a match for you. And you say, this is a grant I should apply for. Again, you see this, you have those things. Again, the NCI, if you remember, there were many institutes. So each of institutes said what they need to do. So for example, this is NCI. So if you're an oncologist, whether you're a surgical oncologist, medical oncologist, radio oncologist, this is one area that you want to look at. And it tells you their area of interest. Studies that examine and aim to improve the communication process and disclosure of information about cancer genetics in a variety of contexts: clinical encounter, telemedicine, family communication, direct to content. So this is a very good, important area for you. You see whether you have the training, whether you have the expertise, whether you have a track record in this area. So these are things that you want to be able to see. So again, you move from NCI, you go to the next one. They have another area of interest, and they tell you the things that are here. Here is a general one. They are looking for proposal that could analyze, measure normative, legal, economic impact of the on the society, assess the role of stakeholder play in shaping interpretation of genomics, examine uses and misuses of genetic information, develop and test strategies addressing misrepresentations. So these are the things that you want to be able to see. So I'll let it be a little wise to a little bit. Okay. So this is one of the things you want to look at. Then when you come down here, in this background here, you want to pay attention to this area. This area is research objective and approaches. So you want to see, again, remember, you are asking for funds to do a work that is dear to you. In doing that, you want to make sure that your idea also fits into the objective and area of interest for the funding agency. So we looked at areas of interest. This particular area objective is, they will tell you those 5 questions that I asked you. When they write an RFA, I tell people that I can write the first complete draft of that grant just based on this area. So this area gives you the issues. If you read it, it will tell you the background, those things I'm talking about. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? They tell you here. What is the gap? They will tell you here. What is not known, they will tell you. The only thing they might not even tell you for clarity, but you have it down here, is what are you proposing? Which you now go back to those areas where they told you where their interest is. So this particular area, I tell people that you can write a proposal, the first draft, complete just by this document. What happens to most people from Nigeria that I've noticed? They do not read instructions. You are not alone. I was like that until I got my butt whipped a lot of times and I started to read instructions. If I buy something, a battery and then a new toy, I don't read instruction. I keep the instruction by the side. I try to fix it. And when I can't fix it, then I go back to the instruction. And that is how we usually do. Well, that's how I used to do it. And it wastes a lot of time. Whereas if you follow the instruction, you can get this done right the best time. Writing grants is a very instruction-driven thing. Is very so that they can compare grants and be able to select the best ones. So this is one of the things you do on a grant, and we talked about the R03. Let me pause here and ask Lanier, do you have questions? So at this point, I will try to move forward with questions that are there and then address them, and then I can come back again to this. But I want to see if people, there are no use to keep talking if there are questions that people really want to ask. So Tonya, can we take some of the questions?
Yes, we can. We have a couple of questions. So someone says, what if we live in the US, but we're not yet citizens? Are we eligible for any of the grants?
No, you are not. If you are a permanent resident living in the US, let me clarify that. Yes, you are eligible, but of course, grants are not given to individuals. NIH can never give a grant to an individual. Grants are given to institutions. So if you are living in the US and you are a permanent resident, but not yet a citizen, and you have an affiliated institution, can you qualify for a grant? The answer is yes. If you move from Nigeria to the US, you have not gotten your permanent residence and you are not eligible to apply for any grants there because you're still considered a citizen of Nigeria and a permanent resident of Nigeria. You can only apply for those grants that international institutions are available. So you can be in the US, and if you're still affiliated with your university in Nigeria, you can still write a grant to your university in Nigeria until you are affiliated with a U.S. institution, at which time you will be disqualified for those grants coming from meant for Nigeria alone.
Okay, so the next question is the BDS, which is the dentistry degree, a terminal degree?
Yes, the dentistry degree is a terminal degree. It's a professional degree and it's a terminal degree. I know there have been confusion in Nigeria as our government has been so confused with certain things. A doctor does not need PhD to have a terminal degree. A doctor is a doctor. MBBS is the same thing as the degree they have in medical school here. The only time people try to differentiate people like me that have MBBS, which is the degree that I have, and is the only degree that I have, the only reason that I put MD in my thing, even though I have an MD degree, is a differentiation that I completed a residency and fellowship training in the US. That is there. I know that Nigeria has tried to change from MBBS to MD as if it means anything. I think it's an inferiority complex for us to do that. MBBS, because what we're saying is that MBBS is not equivalent to an MD. No, the MBBS degree, like I have, is equivalent to an MD degree from Harvard. That is a funding thing. That's how NIH regards it. That's how most people regard it. You can do your residency at the University of Nigeria, University of Ibadan, or you can do your residency at Harvard. But the MD and the MBBS degree that both of you have when you leave medical school is the same. It's the same anatomy that we study, the same head, the same human. We don't study different human. If you open the brain, it's the same. You know, when I went to the US, the thing I really wanted to see was neurosurgery, surgery, because I wanted to see inside the head of a white person to think whether it's any different from our own head. And what I saw there was exactly the same thing Mezo had shown me in medical school when as a neurosurgeon. So nothing different from that. So that terminal degree for professional degree, for medicine, for veterinary medicine, for pharmacy, for dentistry are all terminal professional degrees.
Okay. So the next question says, because we have participants from all over Africa and the world. So this is a question saying, are the NIH grants only for Nigerian citizens?
No, I use this because we were primarily talking about Nigeria, but take Nigeria to be the giant of Africa, whether you agree or not. But humor me, And imagine that Nigeria is giant of Africa. So it's applicable to Nigeria, it's applicable to my friends in Benin Republic.
Okay.
And I say
Is the
Benin
grant,
Republic
is the
because
grant only for medical doctors?
no. I mentioned dentist, I mentioned veterinary medicine, which is people who are who are a professional medical degree, but also remember the other part of it who are not. So let me give an example. If you did medical laboratory science, the BSc that you have in medical laboratory science is not a terminal degree. But you finish your BSc, you did your master's, you did your PhD, you have a terminal degree and you can apply for this. Let me say you did a biochemistry and you did a bachelor's in biochemistry. You're not a terminal degree, but you do your master's, you do your PhD, you are a terminal degree. So for every other courses that are not those professional courses that I meant, your terminal degree is when you get a PhD. So once you have a PhD, you can. These are all health grants for NIH. There is another one that is not all health grant, but we are speaking today mostly on health grant. So it is not for medical doctors alone, it's for every health specialty. So give me an example. You did
Bioinformatics?
psychology. You did psychology. Yeah. You did psychology, have a bachelor's in have a master's in clinical psychology, and had a PhD. You are qualified for this grant. I hope that answered that question. So it's not limited to doctors. To be honest, doctors are the least number of people who apply for this grant because they are around chasing the clinical money. But the truth is that most universities in the US, as you see them, they have among their department people with PhD in medical schools. That's something that we have not learned in our medical school in Nigeria, that people who have a PhD, who are not doctors, but who have a PhD can have an appointment in medical schools, and they can actually help advance that medical school when they team up with the clinicians. The clinicians are important in everywhere that I know, maybe not Nigeria, but they're still the head of the medical team. But most of the time, they don't have the time. They see the patient, they see the problems, but they don't have the time. One of the things I did as a junior faculty was to put in a team. When I came to my department in Las Vegas, when I joined the faculty newly, they had 36 residents. Only 3 of them have presented in a meeting. And when I looked at the issue, I realized that it's very difficult for doctors to put this application together. What did I do? I joined the doctors. I went to the School of Public Health and asked the MPH students whether they want to get work done. They said, yes, we want to. I said, okay, I will pair you up with doctors. So what I did was to pair the MPH with the residents. And then in a 3-year period, we have all 36 residents present at a national meeting. That was the first award I got in my department because nobody has ever done that. But why I did that is that I realized that when I finished my MBBS, got to the US, did my residency, did my fellowship, that I still lack some skills. And I went ahead to do my MPH. And by the time I did my MPH, I saw certain skills that I learned so much. One of the beautiful skills I learned that time was how to freeze an Excel sheet so that when I move to a big data, I don't lose the headings. And you can't even believe how happy I was then. But that's one of the things I learned in my master's, and it was very helpful. So having people who are not doctors in your team is all going to make your team the best.
Yes.
I can't tell you how much I've had that. So go
So
ahead.
I wanted to emphasize on that because Amos here is saying, okay, the grant is only for health practitioners and specialists. Please, when you have a grant for ordinary people, let me know. So I wanted to let him know, just like you said now, that sometimes some of these grants will need us to collaborate with non-health people. It's very important.
So let me go back again to tell you one of the things about health grant for me to do this. This has to be related to health, but it's not only health people, because that team, we haven't gotten to talking a little bit, but that's, today is our introduction. Remember, I told you that over the next 12 months, we're going to talk on each of those 5 areas. And one of the areas we talked about is an investigative team. If you want to propose something in health, one of the things people are going to ask you is it cost effective? If you're going to do the cost effective, who is going to help you do that is the economist. Those are usually the best of the people, health economics, people who did health economics. Some of them are there. If you're going to analyze those data, who is going to analyze it for you? Me? Ask everybody in my team. I do not do my statistics. I did an MPH. It does not make me a statistician. I don't even claim that I'm a statistician. I claim I'm an epidemiologist, but I don't even claim that I'm a statistician. Most of the people who go to do their masters, all of us know that they go to epidemiology and shy away from statistics. Statistics is one of the best, but it takes a lot of skills and energy. So at the end of the day, the first people that I have in my team are statisticians, more importantly, biostatisticians. And I have people in my team who their first degree is mathematics, their second degree is statistics, and their PhD is statistics, and they're the most important people in my team. So these teams are made of, today was not talking about how to put together a team, but if you're joining us and you stay along this period for the next 12 months, you are going to see every component as we discuss every first Monday.
Okay. Thank you, sir. This question is saying, what's any age limit for these grants?
There are no age limit. The only thing is that there is an age benefit, and that age benefit is not dependent on your raw age. It's dependent on when you got your degree. So if you got your degree for more than 10 years, then you do not qualify for the early stage investigator. Does that mean you do not qualify for grants? No, you just don't get the advantage. So you're going to compete with me on a playing field. But if you are within 10 years and we score the same thing, you will get the grant. I won't. So that's the advantage you have for being an early stage investigator.
Okay. Someone wants to know if a PhD student can apply for a K-43.
Yes, a PhD student have a terminal degree and can apply for a K-43. Okay. And what he needs to do is to get the two things about is to have good mentors and then make sure that they prepare themselves, that they're applying for that in an area where they have the training, the education, and also that they have people that are going to be their mentors who have demonstrated expertise in those areas. Usually, I say it is better to have a mentor who have had NIH grant. Doesn't mean that they're the only ones. If they have large grants from the European then that's okay, or from Canada, that's okay. But if they do have an NIH grant, you do know that you have a good mentor. NIH will look at it that way.
Okay, this question is related to what you just mentioned about mentors. Is it compulsory for one to have mentors who have gotten NIH grants before one can apply?
No. So that's what I just said, and I'm going to repeat that again. No. If you have someone who have gotten an NIH grant, you stand a very clear thing because you don't have to explain. So what NIH and the US considers as an independent researcher is someone who has been a PI on an R01. Once you only need one. So if you have been the PI on an R01, as you look at this grant, this is an R03, but you see that it has the other two components that we didn't discuss today, the R21 and the R01. We are going to discuss these things in our sub-seminars, which we have every week. But the R03 is the smallest of them, and then R21 and R01. When you get this funding an R01, which is a project grant, and you have been a principal investigator on it, you are considered an independent researcher. If you have any mentor with this, you do not need any explanation. You just have to say he's PI on R01 and everybody understand that. If you do have someone who have a British grant or grant from Canada, then you have to explain that grant to show them that this is as big as this. So most of these R01 grants are $500,000 a year for 5 years. So they are $2.5 million. So these are big grants. So that's one of the things. So they do not need to have an NIH grant alone, but they need to have an equivalent of these large grants.
Okay, then this other question says, is there an R grant that Nigerian researchers can apply for without necessarily collaborating with US-based researchers?
Yes, all the R. So the only grant that you may sometimes need a US collaborator is the K. You do not need Nigerian US collaborators to apply for the R01, the R21, the R03. No, you do not. And that's something that people need to understand. You might actually be better finding a Nigerian who have had NIH grant. So if you have a Nigerian who have had NIH grant, you do have a grant now. So is there still issues about US institutions? Yes. Who is funding this is Americans. So having a US institution to cooperate is not a bad idea. But I don't want you to think that it's only when you have an American or that once it's an American. No, I'm not an American institution anymore right now. And I was an American institution for 25 years. I'm at the University of Nigeria, but I can bet you we compete fairly as anybody else. So there are people like me in Nigeria But if you do have a good person that is a U.S. institution, it is not a disadvantage.
Okay. You've already answered this, but I guess maybe some of the participants are joining, asking if medical students or dentistry students, undergraduates can apply, and that's a no, because they don't have a terminal degree, right?
No, they do not. There's a different grant for them, and
Okay.
they do not. This is not the grant for them. But you can propose in your grant to train them. So, for example, we have a G11 grant, and this G11 grant is training people on grant management. So in this grant, we are working with the Nigerian Implementation Science Alliance and the five big implementing partners in Nigeria, which is the IHVN, which is APIN, which is CCFN, CIHP, and also ECUS. So these are five organizations we are working with, and we have study sites across Nigeria, 2 in each of the 6 regions in Nigeria, and we are currently training all the 12 site research coordinators, in addition to the ones from University of Nigeria and from the Center for Translation. So we have a 25 trainee sections who are benefiting from our NIH grant to that training. Are they the PIs or co-investigators? No, but are they the benefit and trainees under that grant? Yes. Can they cite that grant when they want to write their own grant? Yes, they can say, I was part of this grant. My role was a trainee. So they can.
Okay. Another question says, can you apply for R01 without being first author of any publication or having very few publications?
You can if you are part of the team. It's unlikely you will get it if you are the PI. So if I'm writing a grant, an R01, you have a special expertise. For example, that you are a pathologist, and I'm looking at samples, breast cancer samples on our cervical cancer stand or on our breast cancer grant. You don't have to even have be the first author on those things. Yes. Because they will look at me and look at you as a pathologist. But there's another way you can define what you do. For example, you can define that you are one of the best pathologists in Nigeria, and you have received an award from the Pathology Association of Nigeria as a pathologist of the year, and you have done about 5,000 breast cancer participants. So you can describe the expertise you have done in ways that are not grant. But that is when you are an investigator on those grants, but not the PI. If you are the PI in those grants and you do not have publications, it is unlikely you are going to get the grant. It's a waste of time, in my opinion.
Okay, quickly, does one's application have to cover all aspects of the call? All the objectives of the call?
No, the objectives are there for you to pick. The objective, you have to try to cover a specific part of it and focus on that area. The same thing with those examples they give you. You pick the ones that you are best. And that's why for this same application, for example, that we looked at, that is still on this screen, you can have different areas. Somebody may be looking at studies that examine and aim to improve this, and while some other person is studies that examine the emerging ethical and implication of having individual genetic information made available online. So these are different things. So this one that has like making it available online, maybe somebody that is from computer science that is doing this. So again, you do not have to be a doctor or a medical person, but you have to be interested in health, because all of this is health. It's National Institute of Health. So the topics are health, but does that mean that you're not going to be there? No, a lot of people I've seen have gotten engineering was engineering. For example, they were looking at cook stoves. In one of the grants that I've seen, they were looking at cook stove and the soot coming and how it affects our respiratory diseases. And the person who got the grant is an engineer.
Okay. Someone's asking, what's the D43 grant?
The D43 grant is a training grant. It's one of the training grants that you really should not be applying for unless you have received a huge grants like R01, or you have been on multiple, you are senior, but it's a training grant. It's unlikely you are going to get a D43 as a PI if you are not a doctor with a demonstrated grant before, or if you're not an investigator. So when I mean doctor, I didn't say medical doctor. I meant doctor by PhD, by MBBS, by DPharm or dentistry or any of those that are doctors. So yes, but a D43 is a training grant. You're applying for fund to train grants. So most of the time, if you're going to train the grant, they're going to ask them, train them on what? So most of the people who are successful with D43, and there are about 6 D43 in Nigeria. And I'm talking about Nigeria for those who are not from Nigeria, but I'm sure in other countries there are. But in Nigeria, there are about 6 D43s in Nigeria. Most of those people also have other grants which they use to train people under that.
Okay, the next question says, from your, thank you for your presentation, sir. From your experience, does NIH fund basic research? Because most of the grants you explain here are for clinicians.
Yes, because I'm a clinician. So that's why I'm focusing on this. But do they fund basic sciences? Yes, but I don't know much about that. That's why I didn't pick that as my example, because I am a clinician. But if that's of interest, we'll bring in somebody who does basics research and they will go ahead. NIH funds more basic research than they actually fund clinical research. So that's one thing for sure. I only presented this because because I'm a clinician, so I'm coming from an area of expertise. But the NIH does fund more than that. I know that we have passed our time, but I'm interested in answering this question, so I'm gonna stay here until those questions are answered. So keep going for them. And I want to thank everyone who have made a chance to join us. We have ended in terms of what we are able to do today, but I'm gonna stay here and answer these questions. So if you want to hear the answers, you can stay. If you want to have more questions, I'll be here, but I will deal with questions to the end of our time here. I think in those questions, it's an opportunity. So keep going.
Yeah, there's another question that says, what is the chance of getting a grant where a giant in grant writing is already writing the same grant in the same country? For example, like the LC grants, it's a big grant that, so they're wondering.
When there's a giant writing grant, it's a very good opportunity for you to compete. And the reason there's a government, you have all of us may have seen that picture when there are 5 beds and then there are 5 beds and you see 4 of the beds facing in one direction and 1 is facing the other direction. What you have to do to beat the giant is to think differently from them. So if you see what everybody is thinking, like everybody in Nigeria is going to, the thing that is running now is implementation science. I'm going to do implementation science. You look at them and then you face the other side and do a data science, do something different. And then you find out that everybody is bringing their application in, that they're increasing their own competition, but then there's one application that comes in different. And that's what you should be able to try. So if you want to compete with the giant, think differently from the giant. You can beat them in the game that they have already done very well. My team knows that very well. When we look at applications, we are looking at, they have different areas. We are looking at where will Harvard go? Where would Hopkins go? Where would these people go? Where is it that they can't go because they don't have the infrastructure? Because that infrastructure is talking about things in the ground. That's when usually we see those Harvard looking for people in Nigeria, looking for people in LMIC to work with them because they understand more of the background. But also that is an area that you know very well and you apply from the grant. One of the grants we applied for and one of the best scores we got is the one we actually applied from Nigeria. And we applied from it from all people in Nigeria. And we did have one from Hopkins who joined us, but all the other investigators were all from Nigeria. And we got the best score we have gotten in NIH grant. So don't underestimate the power of what you have, depending on the topic. If you're going to do a basic science and looking at new cure for HIV, of course, we don't have a lot of institutions in Nigeria that are very good with that. But if you're looking at things like this, ethical, legal, social implications, you can have an idea that is exceptional from Nigeria.
Okay, someone's asking, what about companion funding? What's that?
Companion funding is when there is a funding like this one, for example. There is companion funding here. Where was that? Here. There's companion funding. So that means remember this grant we're looking at right now is an R03, small grant, an R03 clinical trial. It means this same grant, this exact same grant, you can apply through an R21. An R21 is an exploratory development grant. I consider it one of the hardest grants to obtain. I've had one of these, but it's one of my hardest ones to get. And R21 is exploratory and developmental. So when you're trying to develop a new thing, this is one of the things that is new things. It is 125,000 a year for 2 years. The RO3, which is the one we have here, is 50,000 a year for 2 years. The R21 is mostly 125,000 for 2 years. The RO1 is the largest of the grant, is up to 500,000 a year for 5 years. So that is what is different. But all these three grants are the same thing here. So it depends on where you are. If you have not done anything before, you may start with an RO3 to just collect basic information. Then you go to an RO1 to explore even more. Then you go to an R21 to explore even more. Then you go to an RO1 to compare. Whenever you have arms and comparative, you have this I'm one, I'm two, I'm three. Those are not RO3. Those are not R21. Those are RO1. For you to be successful in RO1, you need preliminary study. You do not need preliminary study in RO3. You do not need preliminary study in R21. You need preliminary studies to write an RO1. You can be an early investigator and do an RO3. You cannot be not done any publication, no grants, nothing, and apply for an RO1. You're wasting your time because an RO1 requires preliminary studies that have been published. So that's one of the things about it.
Someone is asking, are there specific grants for statisticians?
Yes, there are specific grants for statisticians, but what I say is that every grant involves a statistician. I've not seen any RO1 that does not involve a statistician. So the statistician is always part of the team. But are there grants that statistician can write as primes? Yes. And again, I didn't focus on them today because I'm not a statistician. But if it's something that you write our center, we can provide that, especially, like I said, even though we do this once a month on our team, we also have weekly research for 50 weeks in a year. So what we discussed today for 1 hour, we also spend 1 hour every week for 50 weeks going over these things in our team. How do you join our team? You are going to see that. Go to ctr.gov or go to nisaresearch.gov. So those things, two email address will be on the chat box for you. We are having a call where we are looking for 5 people across the country who have applied for grants before. What we want to do here is to provide the mentoring for them. So if you have applied for a grant before, you didn't get it, or you have an excellent idea, again, you are qualified, which means you have a terminal degree. Then you have an excellent idea, which you have by a concept sheet, by 1 page or 2 page concept, preferable 1 page concept sheet. And then you have or may have not have applied for NIH and didn't get it. We will be happy to look at you. We are going to select 5 people across the country, and I'm going to spend 24 weeks with them, mentoring each and every one of them to submit a grant. If we are successful with that, we are going to repeat that again and take another 5 people from July to December. So if you don't qualify for this cohort, you do that. But go to the website that is on your chart, and then you are able to get that information. And that call should be out in a couple of weeks. I think it's ending February 5th. So once you see it on the website, please respond to it if you are interested. And I will personally, with the team, mentor those people who are selected. It is very competitive. So because we're looking for the 5 people in the whole country, but we want to select the 5 best people and spend 24 weeks of our time with them, mentoring them to submit an NIH grant.
Okay, Prof, before we go to the hands that are raised, someone's saying, can you go from a K43 to an RO1? Is it possible?
That is how it's supposed to be. The K protects your time for you to develop an RO1. So after your K, you should be going for an RO1. Okay. So the way, if you look at an American who is very smart and went to, let's pick a doctor, did medical school at Harvard, went to do residency at Hopkins, and did a PhD, did a fellowship at Yale. And then while at Yale, they will write their K grant and then join the faculty at the University of Maryland. And in 5 years, they will write their first RO1. They will now move from assistant professor to associate professor, and they get their first RO1. Then they finish their RO1. By the time they're finishing their RO1, they write their second RO1, and by the time that's another 5 years. So 5 years for the K, 5 years for the R01, the first R01, 5 years for the second R01. That's 15 years. That's how people here move from assistant professor, associate professor, full professor. That the grant is the number one thing that moves them. I know that in Nigeria, we don't use grants, but that's why we don't do grants. But it's changing in Nigeria. I can tell you for sure that many institutions are reconsidering and trying to support their institution to compete, because that's how you bring funding. We have grants now, but because of the grant we have with the Nigerian Implementation Science Alliance, we're able to have 12 research coordinators paid for 5 years across the country. That is huge. That is a competition that all the collaborators and all the investigators from all of those organizations that I mentioned earlier on have all pulled together to write grant. And by the way, we are all mostly Nigerians. We do have our collaborator from University of California, San Diego, for example, who have been to NISA meetings this year. I also want to encourage you. We do have NISA weekly research, so quarterly research week, so where we set out a whole week and we go through all those things that I talked about, the 5 stock there. We do that once every 3 months. I think the next one is coming up in March. So if this is of area of interest for you, do that. The reason we are doing this is that one of the biggest things people have complained about not being able to write grants in Nigeria is lack of mentors. But we want to take that excuse away from the table. That's why we're offering these things. We offer weekly research mentoring for 50 weeks in a year. We offer a monthly research webinar like we're doing now every month for 12 months. We offer quarterly research week, which is every week for 4 times a year. All of these things we are doing is to remove the idea, is to give you the background, give you the opportunity. During those research week, we invite people from every major US institutions. The last time we had people from Hopkins, Albert Einstein, Harvard, University of Maryland, anywhere. And if there are any special person that you want us to invite, we will. What we can tell you is that we can invite any speaker from the US to speak with us. Why is that? Because a lot of these people are very good people that also very interested in helping develop capacity in LMIC, and most of them have received NIH grant, and NIH has been a very good institution for Nigeria in terms of how many grants they've funded in Nigeria. For example, the UO1 that was recently funded, they funded 8 grants around the world. 4 of them were in Nigeria. So we are very grateful for NIH, and for someone like me who have received NIH grant before, many times this is the best way for me to give back.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think we should go to the hands that are raised. There are actually 3 hands. So I'm going to call on Bolanle Omotosho to speak, please, to ask a question. Bolanle, you can speak now. You're muted. Hello. Okay. Quickly, let's go over to Dr. Vitalis Okwo. Dr. Vitalis Okwo, you can speak, your hand's raised.
So people should make the questions, we are over time.
Yeah.
So if you unmute yourself.
Let me call Dr. Okay, Dr. Okwo is about to speak. Go ahead, Dr. Okwo.
Okay, good evening all.
Yeah, good evening.
Okay, I just want to appreciate the lecture, and it's quite interesting. But my area of challenge is how to hone the topic down, kind of a specificity and the goals of the. You have the general goals and the specific goals. How do you select the specific goals that can help one sell? Thank you.
So thank you for asking that question. So the research development is a very long period of development. Hold on 1 second, please. Just 1 second, somebody, it's my mic.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I'm getting some questions about how to get to the application. So when you get on the website, because I want to see, show you how to do that. When you get on the CTIA website, as soon as you get on the CTIA website, there's going to be a little pop-up, a little flyer that will pop up, and it says, click here. The flyer has a heading, CTIA Scholar Program. And then it has click here. When you click on the click here, it takes you straight to the online application and you can fill it, please. Thank you.
So I'm back, and so the training research program that what you just asked about specificity, so we do that. So we have 3 different kind of program, and one of them is the one that we make available to everyone across the country. That's the one that you are talking about right now. We are going to pick 5 people, and we are going to walk them from the beginning to the end. The beginning meaning we are going to take them to Grants.Gov, work with them to see the best grant, move from there to submitting of the grant. So that's a 24-week program that we have. It's intensive, but we are selecting 5 people to do that for free. The second one that we have is a program that we have where people are members of the CTIA. We have those criteria, and then those people over a 50 weeks period during the year, we go through every aspect of the two ones. So that is also free. We also do have a paid version. A paid version is basically what we actually do in the US for US citizens, but we do have people join on that from Nigeria. And again, for those ones, you have to come to, that's why we do these free ones. You have to come there with some idea. So you have learned from all of these free things that we have talked about, so you can utilize your money better. Then you have now come to where you have an idea what you want to do because of these things you have participated in. You put some ideas together and you are able now to do that. So when you do that, that helps you focus on that particular one, and we walk you through to the time you submit grant. So again, those 3 are ways where you go into detail. So what we do with this monthly one is to, first of all, get your interest, give you direction, go there. And again, there are so many opportunities in Nigeria where these things are going on. So we are not the only ones, but we do pride ourselves because we do provide a lot of free services to our community and country through these things we do at no cost to you. I speak today, but if you join us for the rest of the year, you're going to see the type of people that we actually bring here. Next one, we're actually going to be bringing NIH program officers to speak on this program to talk about the things also that we talked about. They will pick another area of the grant. There are some of them will come in and talk about specific grant, even more than I discussed today. So you will see people from very good institutions, and also you see people from NIH. Okay.
Okay. Dr. Seni, please unmute and ask your question. Dr. Seni. Dr. Seni, we can hear you. Okay, so I guess we have come to the end of the webinar today. We want to thank you so much, Professor Ezenole. Thank you so much for this very interesting webinar. There are still a lot of questions and comments about the website. We've sent the website link. We've also sent the YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, so you can go there and listen to this lecture again. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next month with another webinar. Thank you and have a nice rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And for those people who want to have further interaction with me, I will be on podcast. And in that place, I would really talk a little bit and then just take questions like we've done. So one of the things we are going to be bringing you this year is an opportunity. We are not going to give lectures. We are going to do when people come to speak, especially like when we invite external speaker, when they leave, we have a little bit of Q&A for another 1 hour where you can ask questions, and that will be available, and people from my team will be available to also help you. We want you to succeed, and that's one of our pride is that you will go back and sometime in your career, you say, I remember the first time I attended this workshop, this webinars from CTL Group at UNN, and that it was very helpful to me. And also, if you like what we're doing, follow us on LinkedIn. Give us a like. So we do have the Nigerian Implementation Science Alliance, which is the main umbrella that we do this. So if you are grateful and you're happy for what we've done, follow us at NISA, NISA, Nigerian Implementation Science Alliance on LinkedIn. Give us a shout out. Tell us topics you want us to bring people new to. That's a very good way for us to do that. So we want to hear from you, see the new things that you want us to bring. And thank you. I hope that as you start the new year with us, that you'll be with us throughout the year, and at the end of 2023, you'll be grateful that you have, and we'll be happy that we have provided you some service. Thank you all, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, thank you so much, and bye.